Good day, senior high school students, and welcome back. I am your online math tutor, Ma'am Karin. I am so glad that you are here to join us in discussing the lesson in statistics and probability. Our topic today is about sampling and sampling distribution. For the objectives, number one, illustrate random sampling. Number two, distinguish between parameter and statistic. Number three, identify sampling distributions of statistic. For the sample mean, find the mean and variance of the sampling distribution of the sample mean. Number five, define the sampling distribution of the sample mean for normal population when the variance is known and unknown. Illustrate the central limit theorem. Define the sampling distribution of the sample mean using the central limit theorem. And the last one is to solve problems involving sampling distributions of the sample mean. To discuss sampling distribution, let us first define population. When we say population, it refers to the entire group that is under study. In this group, it doesn't always refer to people. It can mean a group containing elements of anything you want to study, such as objects, events, organizations, countries, species, organisms, etc. Since the study of population is not possible and impracticable, we can have a representative from the population, and that is what we call sample. It refers to a subject taken from a population. To have a better understanding about population and sample, let us have this illustration. From a bigger group, you can have the sample. Example of population and sample. In population, advertisements for IT jobs in the Philippines. As representative or as sample, the top 50 search results for advertisements for IT jobs in the Philippines on May 1, 2021. Another, undergraduate college students in Naga City. As a representative or sample from the population, 300 undergraduate nursing students from 3 universities in Naga City. Always remember that sample is less than the population. Random sampling. It is a selection of n elements derived from a population n, where each sample point has an equal chance of being selected using the appropriate sampling technique. In other words, random sampling is a process of selecting samples from a population. In a population, everyone is given a chance to be chosen using the appropriate sampling technique. In this definition, you can see the symbol small letter n that is for the sample size, and the big or the capital letter N is for the population size. The question is, what are the appropriate sampling techniques? The first type of random sampling technique is lottery sampling. This is a sampling technique where every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. In other references, this is also known as fishbowl technique. It is simply writing the names or numbers of all the individual members in a small rolled piece of papers, then placed it in a container. Ito yung ginagamit sa lottery sampling to ensure that the numbers are well mixed. Or pwede naman mano-mano, you can just have the paper with a number, then the researcher or the teacher will just pick a paper from a bag or from a container. The second type of random sampling technique is systematic sampling. It is a sampling technique in which members of the population are listed and samples are selected in intervals called sample intervals. In this technique, every nth element from the list is selected from a randomly selected starting point. For us to understand systematic sampling, let us have this illustration. From the population, there are 12 here. The starting point is 2, which is randomly selected. So from the second element, we will count 3 as the sample interval. Meaning, from the starting point, yung ika-third element, yung magiging kasali na sa sample. So as the starting point, which is 2, 2 is included in the sample or the second element. From the starting point, we will count 3. 1, 2, 3. So the fifth element is included in the sample. 1, 2, 3. Also the eighth element and also the 11th element is included in the sample. All in all, there are 4 samples from the population. This sampling technique is what we call systematic sampling. The third type of random sampling technique is stratified random sampling. It involves dividing the entire population into homogeneous groups called strata. Random samples are then selected from each stratum. In other references, it is also called proportional random sampling. To understand stratified random sampling, let us have this illustration. From a population with 2 groups of people, we can have a strata, which is the division of the entire population into homogeneous groups. When we say homogeneous groups, these are groups with common characteristics. So from strata, we can randomly select our sample. Depending on the total number of population and also the total number of people or object in each group. So we can finalize our sample. To compute for the sample using the stratified random sampling, we can have here this problem. Select a sample n. The small letter n stands for sample size of 387 students from a population which are grouped according to the cities they come from. The table below shows the number of students per city. There are 4 cities. Those are A, B, C, and D. And the population or the capital letter N, that is for the population size. For city A, we have 13,000. For city B, we have 10,500. For city C, there are 8,000. For city D, there are 5,000 students. Using stratified random sampling, we can compute for its sample for 387 students. There will be 3 columns here. For column A, that is CT. For the second column, for the population, that is from the problem. And in the third column, we are going to identify the sample per city. So the first step is to compute for the total of the population. So 13,000 plus 10,500 plus 8,000 plus 5,000, that is equal to 36,500. So itong 36,500 gagamitin natin for us to get the sample. Let us have CTA, identifying the sample. So that is considering the population in CTA, 13,000 divided by the total population, that is 36,500, multiplied to how many sample? From the problem, yung nakalagay doon is we need only 387 students from the 4 cities. So we're going to get the proportion of this. In your calculator, 13,500 divided by 36,500 times 387. That is approximately 138. Kung yung lumabas sa calculator ay may point something pa, please round off. Round off the final answer in your calculator. In CTB, we have here 10,500 divided by 36,500 as the total population times 387. That is equal to 111. Again, here you are going to round off. Round off the answer in your calculator. Next, for CTC, 8,000 divided by 36,500 from the total population multiplied to 387. In your calculator, that is 85. Again, round off the final answer. In D, we have 5,000 divided by 36,500 times 387. Please round off the answer in your calculator, and that is 53. So if you are going to add the samples taken from CTA to D, that should be equal to 387. So dapat eksakto, walang butal. So 138, let us try. 138 plus 111 plus 85 plus 53, that is 387. Hindi dapat sosobra sa 387, eksakto lang. So yung kukunin mo out of 13,000 na population sa CTA, ang kukunin mo lang is 138 as your total. Sa CTB, from 10,500, ang magiging sample mo na lang is 111 students. From CTC, from 8,000, yung kukunin mo na lang is 85 students. And from CTD, we have 5,000 and kukunin mo na lang is 53 students. So that would be a total of 387. So itong sistema ng pagkuha ng sample, ito yung tinatawag na stratified random sampling. Next type of random sampling technique is cluster sampling. It is sometimes called area sampling. It's because it is applied on a geographical basis. It is generally done by first sampling at the higher levels before going down to the lower levels. To understand cluster sampling, let's have this illustration. In here, this is the population of all customers in a restaurant. You can see that there are 4 clusters or there are 4 groups which are being chosen from the population. So kapag sinabing cluster sampling, ang pagpili ng sample ay by group at yung lahat ng elements or individual dun sa cluster na randomly selected, lahat yun ay kasali na sa sample. In this illustration, cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, and cluster 4 are randomly selected and they are all included in the sample. The last type of random sampling technique is the multistage sampling. In this technique, it is done using a combination of different sampling techniques. For example, to get a sample from a population, you may use lottery sampling to get an initial sample. Then after that, you can use stratified random sampling to get your final sample. That is what you call multi-stage sampling because in here or in this process, you use the first technique, which is the lottery sampling, and then you used also the stratified random sampling. Now, it's your turn. Identify which type of sampling is used. Lottery sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, or systematic sampling. Number 1. The game show organizer writes the name of each contestant on a separate card, shuffles the cards, and draws 5 names. What type of sampling technique is this? Number 1, this is a lottery sampling. Number 2, a hospital researcher interviews all diabetic patients in each of 10 randomly selected hospitals. So in number 2, there are 10 selected hospitals and all the patients in those hospitals are interviewed. So what type of sampling technique is this? Number 2 is cluster sampling. Number 3, Smart selects every 100th cell phone from the assembly line and conduct a thorough test of quality. So, yung ika-100th na cellphone, yun yung makakasali sa sample. So, what type of sampling technique is this? Number 3 is systematic sampling. Number 4, there are 30 freshmen, 20 sophomores, 10 juniors, and 5 seniors enrolled in a certain course. Samples are to be taken from them according to the total number of students per year level. So what type of sampling technique is this? Number 4 is stratified random sampling because the samples which are to be taken will be chosen according to the total number of students per year level. So there will be a proportion. So number 4 is stratified random sampling.